About a year ago, President Trump ordered a missile strike on Syria. It was in response to the supposed use of chemical weapons by the government of Bashar al-Assad in the civil war there in Syria. It was never clear how attacking Syria was in America's national interest. We weren't at war with the country. We have no reason to be. The Secretary of Defense at the time, General Mattis, argued that such a strike would need congressional approval in order to be legal. The president launched missiles anyway without a vote in Congress. And almost unanimously, Republicans in Washington backed him and backed the attack. Presidents ought to be allowed to take decisive action, they argued. Congress should not get in the way. That was their position. If the president announced another missile strike against Syria or Libya or pick a country tomorrow, they would say the same thing. When it comes to fighting pointless wars in far-off countries, Republicans believe a president should do whatever he sees fit. What's interesting, though, is how dramatically their view changes when there is an actual threat to the United States. Case in point. 2 months ago, President Trump responded to the worsening situation on our southern border by declaring a national emergency and requesting federal funds to construct a much-needed border wall across our southern border. How did Congress respond to that request? Well, it was interesting. The very same Republicans who had defended the unauthorized Syria strike suddenly sounded very concerned about process. They said our Constitution would be imperiled if the president acted unilaterally to protect our borders without first getting a vote in Congress. There were 17 of these Republicans, 9 in the Senate and 8 in the House. All of them supported the Syria bombing, but then voted to block the president's executive order to build a border wall to protect America. Senator Roger Wicker was one of them. Wicker came on this show a year ago, and you can look it up, and enthusiastically defended the strikes against Syria. And yet in March, faced with the prospect of securing his own country, Mr. Wicker solemnly explained that an emergency border wall would devastate, quote, the constitutional principle of checks and balances. Senator Wicker represents the state of Mississippi. What percentage of his voters could possibly agree with this standard? 10%? That's probably too high an estimate. Probably more like 2% agree with Roger Wicker on this. And yet somehow Wicker still holds his Senate seat. How is that? People are starting to figure out the scam that is neoconservatism. One news account this week explained that President Trump has begun to wonder about his national security advisor, John Bolton. Bolton, you'll remember, led the cheering for the Iraq invasion in 2003. He supported the overthrow of Gaddafi in Libya a couple years later. He pushed for preemptive strikes on Iran and North Korea. He called Russia's actions in the United States in 2016 an act of war. He agreed with Bill Kristol on that. He's advocated for regime change in Venezuela, Cuba, Nicaragua. Trump, of course, ran against all of that. Apparently, the president has told people around him this week that John Bolton wants to get him, quote, into a war. Now, we're not in the habit of fact-checking other people's news stories. But in this case, we can confirm that conclusively. Yes, Mr. President, John Bolton does want to get you into a war. It's all he wants. It's what he dreams about. Many wars, if possible. And if you're not careful, he'll do it.